discuss regarding the limbic system components, what important role they play in dreaming. In this video, we describe that there are two main streams, one circular and one radial energy exchanges, that if these two streams resonate together, a brain functioning will happen. So dreaming also needs not only the amygdala and hippocampus be active, also the cortex layers, especially the inner layers, and the middle layer 4, would be active as well. Of course, the outer layer mostly they are active during the waking time, especially during the focused thoughts generation. In neural assembly, as we describe and mean in this theory, kinematics of brain activities theory, is the same as neural networks. The difference is that by neural networks we just have a concept of almost a solid connectivity configuration in mind, but a neural assembly is a variable neural networks in connections, and this variability of configuration depends on the circular strain wave that the neural assembly or neural network is exposed to that. So by that the neural assembly not only conduct and carry the energy package, but also receive that, hold it for maybe temporary, and also this neural assembly may reconfigure its own connections, which never we think about that in the definition of the neural networks. So the difference between a neural network and a neural assembly is that neural networks is almost a solid shape, where a neural assembly is a neural network which is flexible to stress forces. It strains when exposed to it, and partially or completely returns back to its original connectivity configuration when the source of stress is removed. A neural assembly is a neural network with a viscoelastic property. The cortex, as discussed in another video, has got a lot of folds and convolutions. These folds and convolution in different areas, they distinguish the type of the connectivity configurations as well. We can say that from the protein foldings in molecular size up to the layer foldings in different location of the cortex, somehow they present a fractal structure there, and so that the neural networks in different scales in that location, they somehow symbolize each other and convey the essence of meaning they have as a memory motif. We know that the cortex is made of the three different layers all around the brain, right and left side, and in inner layers, especially layer 5 and 6, they have more solid connectivity configuration, and due to that we refer that they encode the long-term memory motifs. In opposite, the outer layer of the cortex, they are more flexible and are exposed to the waves of the strain carrier waves, and due to that, they, in one hand, convey the information encoded in their inner layers as memory motifs, and connect that to the before and after neural assemblies, the information they have, and by that they integrate the thought or a dream. Dream normally happens when these waves in outer layers are of lower kinematics, but the potential in the inner layers are higher. In thought generation, in waking time, it is opposite. The kinematic layer, the kinematic strain energy through the outer layer is much higher, and potential is not so significant in inner layers. Kinematic strain energy through the outer layer shows itself by the current of the short-term memory, and strain packages in this current are components of the short-term memory. These components normally they match as much as possible to the long-term motifs in the same neural assemblies in the lower layer of that. If they do not match together and they somehow or partially resonate, they produce more strain energy, and this strain energy later on needed to be relieved, or otherwise, if they are strong enough, they reconfigure the connectivity in lower layers and produce new long-term memory motifs, or erase or weaken, or opposite stringent connectivity in the neural assembly. We somehow connected the strain energy kinetics to the short and working memories, short-term and working memories, and the potential in the neural assembly to the uh, put to the memory motifs or long-term memory motifs. In waking, the activated neural assembly are very small and fine because the strain packages form are small. But in the low frequency of brain waves, um, for example, during the sleep and especially in the deep sleep, these strain packages they form in bigger size. This is could be a reason that in dreaming stages of the sleep, sometimes we have pieces of the memory instead of the pixels of the memory. Pixels of the memory units normally integrate in third generation waking, but bigger pieces of them will incorporate in the dream integration or narratives that happen during the dreaming. As already discussed, in dreaming phases or stages of the sleep, mostly the cortex layers 3 to 5 and 6 are more active. They receive inputs through layer 4 from the mainly amygdala as well as the circulating strain packages which relieve from the cortex locations and recycle around, and these strains strain packages normally with high potential they deform the connectivity configuration in deeper stages of sleep and encode a new memory unit regarding what happened during the day in course of a stressful event. There is a famous experiment called the Lorenz chaotic waterwheel. In this experiment, the water just drops from top side on the wheel that has got many buckets all around, and all buckets they are not rotating by any external force, but only by type of the water they receive. They have got each bucket has got a hole in bottom, and there is a chance of the water from bottom of any one which receive water to pour it to the other one below that, and in this way the wheel will start to rotate, but rotation is not in one direction exactly, and it is in a chaotic way. In this chaotic way, however, they follow the attractor streamlines, means that when they are when we let them to the experiments continue for a while, the plotting of the streamlines as the attractor lines actually show us a very regularized pattern, and this is just an experience that very clearly give an idea how what happens in the brain. If we look at the wheel as a symbol for steering carrier waves that go through the cortex layers, and looking on the water which they receive and drain from bottom to the input and outputs that each neural assembly receive and dispatch it to other one, and then we see that there is very similarity between these two patterns, and both systems demonstrate a chaotic system. Again, here we have a repetition of the same concept from the previous slides. Actually, the short-term memory over the sensory brain and working memory over the motor brain, they are connecting strain packages that are exchanges between the strain carrier waves all around the cortex with the oscillating neural assemblies, oscillating connectivity configuration within neural assemblies, and when they resonate in over or in a neural assembly, means that that assembly is activated and encoded long-term memory and short-term component over that assembly. They exchange information together. They combine or just transfer outward or inward. The way of the research to understand the brain functioning is the understanding the continuum and connection in the different scales of the global, intermediate, and small between neurons. Of course, mostly it is focused on the global and part of intermediate, and the project already are handling this research, are huge project between different universities all around the world, and still it is in level of the global and intermediate, and as we know, the global neural networks for which normally they present themselves somehow with the brain convolutions, cortex convolutions, are almost general for human beings, of course with some differences. In intermediate scale, they are more varied depending on the geography and the culture that the different people they grow up, and for the fine and small neural networks which consolidate over the cortex and inside the hippocampus or in the other parts of the brain. And it depends on the individual experiences that each person have during the life. So in the small scales they are very different, in the intermediate some differences, and in the global they are mainly the same. As we can see, the main folds or the cortex, all the same. Here, the way that in neural network analysis of the brain functioning happens is based on the considering neural networks as almost a solid connectivity configuration. In brain kinematics theory, the viscosity of uh, this brain tissues, especially in the very fine sizes in the dendritic uh, scale, or in the synapses, they are very significant, and they happen over the association areas in different parts of the brain of different order, and it is very important and should be considered. Uh, Hereafter, we introduce some uh, neural networks in different scales that are studied and classified for uh, studying of the brain activities in neural network study subject. Uh, Here, as I told, in this brain activity context, we should add the viscoelasticity property of this connectivity assemblies further to the neural networks as well. So we call them neural assemblies instead of neural networks. Okay, so neural networks have got three characteristics. Uh, they have a connectome. Connectome means structure, or if we look at them very statistically in a solid way, uh, connectivity means that how they connect and carry or how they communicate with other neural networks, and continuum is the way that the structure and uh, conducting of information are regulated. So each continuum has got in inner layers of the assembly, neural assembly, has got some encoded information. This as a long-term memory motif, and connectivity means that how this encoded information will be activated and then communicate with or and integrate with information from other neural assemblies. And continuum is the way that this static and dynamic way of information transferring are combined. Uh, so all these three characters of each neural assembly is very important. Physically, the backup for connectome is the more rigid connectivity configuration, especially in the inner layers of an assembly. Uh, Continuum is the way that oscillation will conduct or convey the encoded information in the inner layer to outer layer, and connectivity means that this transferred information to the outer layer will connect or emerge or merge with the information that are traveling from other assemblies before and after in the strange circulation wave cycling. Those neural networks are categorized as local, intermediate, and global. Local are referred to modules or community the connections of nodes and ties actually in a network. They they preserve the minimum sizes of the encoded information as a long-term memory, very small one to some integration of the 500 neurons or around that, or maybe more, and minimum could be 50 to 100. So it is the term in term of the hundreds. Intermediate are so these local neural networks as assemblies, they are located in the one area of the cortex, and each area of the cortex is characterized by the similarity in geometric, in the connectivity configuration, and as I told, more or less, the encoded information symbolizes each other or give a meaning or gate to other assembly meaning encoded information. So they are very localized compared to intermediate that they connect between the regions, and in areas we have normally the fractal of the memory motifs. But in intermediate size, these almost fractal shapes, which are not ideal, is goes to a irregular in a static way, but these connections follow the attractor streamlines because they want to receive to a strain balance, and this strain balance emerge some attractor directions for these strain packages to follow. In global, they are very different. They are each activation of a global network actually present a fragment of the brain activity, a fragment of the thought, or fragment of the dream in advanced shape of that. The global networks are known. There are not many. The default mode network, Stalin's network, attention networks, which are two almost, fronto-parietal networks, and some other networks which are not famous as this one. These are already mentioned. Uh, so the uh, some of the networks we are naming and just giving a very summary definition for them are local, but it can extend to the intermediate and global. As already discussed, the local neural networks are more viscoelastic material. When we go to the intermediate and global, they tend to be more rigid and if elastic but not viscoelastic significantly. In neural network study of the brain functioning, the local networks are referred by the modules, hubs when isolated networks are connected through hubs, and then cores and rich clubs. These networks actually start from very small sizes and very local, extending to intermediate size and finally global. So we follow the same study just by considering that these networks they are container of the strain energy packages. They are viscoelastic in the local size especially, although in the intermediate and the large global sizes they are not significant viscoelastic anymore. There is one more important information to be considered in a study of the brain functioning by network units, and that is the neural assemblies will be connect and transfer information and will be integrated their information in the general strain carrier wave along a pathway. But it doesn't mean that they are just in a very straight line. Laterally, also over the cortex, there are some connection and the exchange of information between the next neural assemblies. We call these features. We can consider any subject, any concept is integrated of different features. So feature is the spatial dimension of integration of informations. So information when for example, a person has got a face, has got maybe wear glass, could be tall, or these are features. But a person act in a definite way or has got a certain behavior. That is the time or temporal dimension of data information integration or encoded information integration. Hops are the center connection both in the spatial dimension as well as in the temporal. The connection around the cortex in one cycle, we refer that as a fragment of thought, a fragment of the dream, and so on. But each brain activity is made of several fragments, means that we circulate several times the string carrier waves and interact with different neural assemblies along pathways in the timely direction and in the space direction. And by that, that activity should arrive in a strain balance to terminate. Therefore, hop here is a very important concept. It connects the isolated small size of features, integrating together to a fragment, and the fragments to an activity. Encoded information in a small neural networks or neural assembly smaller than a size almost is meaningless. Remember that for alphabet, before that we have different elements in linguistics that by themselves none of them is meaningful, but beyond a combination of that in words and sentences, the meaning will be deepened and more transferable, or more useful in communication when those which are very brief and very small almost they do not convey a meaning. Therefore, hops and later on further cores which set off the hops connect the several local networks, increase the integration of the integration of encoded information are merging to each other, and by that the meaning will be deepened and deepened more. And so by connection of the local neural networks in community, the features will be added to each other, and then we can recognize object, self, nouns, colors, numbers, and all kind of the static concepts like that. Even signs, alphabet, words, and there are a lot of the researches and attempts are going on to define certain location of the cortex and allocate them to which kind of the memory uh, they fit or they host. Uh, I guess by in some indication that we receive more sensory information, we'll have the shape integration of the features to imagine an object, but in some other places more conceptual and memory inputs they integrate as features together, for example, to project self to us. This self, we know that it is not fixed. It is fixed by we have a name, we have a shape, and like that. But when we are thinking about ourselves, one day we will see ourselves a successful person. Sometimes we are disappointed from ourselves, and the type of the projection of the self varies day by day. Uh, Same happens for the concept. Sometimes from the same text, we receive a very deep meaning, and sometimes we feel it is nonsense. Uh, in general, when we go for a different type of the neural networks and neural assemblies in kinematics term, uh, they in different cortex areas they have got different shapes and size and configuration of the connections, neural connections, and depending on that, uh, uh, we will have different type of the encoded information are saved on those locations. Um, However, in any specific location, as discussed before, we have the fractal structure for the connectivity configurations, and they somehow are categorized in the same way, or they convey uh, symbolic, or they are categorized in a more global population of some of these neural networks in some location increase the capacity of the memorizing or saving memories, but some larger one they increase the communication rate. So for example, for the waking thought generation, the larger networks should be activated and be in place, where in the dreaming and the memory building, very small and local to intermediate networks are active, and they generate dream narratives. To summarize, there are some local neural assembly that excite by especially receiving inputs from layer 4 either from brainstem or from the limbic system components, especially amygdala, and also the strain carrier waves which travel through the pathways and streamlines. The streamlines uh, they deviate from energy attractors for the chaotic medias, uh, but they attend or they tend to arrive uh, to the streamlines of an attractor, which indicate the system arrives in a strain balance at that position. So the pathways of the brain activities normally they seek shortage distance and shortage time of connection between the local neural networks, expanding to intermediate and expanding to the global, and repeating different globals to toward the termination of the activity when the strain arrives in a balance at that point. Again, we are on the end of this presentation, Dreamium 11-3. All the illustration and figures I have used in these presentations have taken from the different references and they are owned by the others actually. The full reference of these illustrations and figures are given in the related articles in my blog www.fluentwriting.com solution page. Thank you for watching and do not forget to provide your feedback and comment to most.dini@gmail.com.